tak jak zresztą bardzo dużo ludności. I niestety, kiedy tylko Rosjanie przekroczyli granicę polską 17 września 1939 roku i ta wiadomość dotarła do Zofii Kossak, ona postanowiła, że zawrócą cały ten tabor, że przedostali w końcu jakby na niemiecką stronę. Myślę, że to była świadoma decyzja Zofii Kossak, po prostu doświadczenie rewolucji bolszewickiej.
It was 1938. In the heart of Lwów, the air was thick with anticipation. Zofia Kossak-Szczucka, a celebrated Polish writer, walked the familiar cobblestone streets, sensing an undercurrent of unease. The vibrant city, known for its rich cultural tapestry, now whispered of impending change. Conversations in cafes grew hushed, and the once lively markets seemed overshadowed by a looming uncertainty. Zofia's life had been dedicated to chronicling Poland's history and traditions. Her novels and essays resonated with a deep love for her homeland, capturing the essence of Polish identity. Yet, as she observed the subtle shifts around her, a nagging fear took root. The political landscape of Europe was darkening, and the ominous rise of totalitarian regimes threatened the very fabric of nations. In her modest apartment, surrounded by stacks of manuscripts and historical texts, Zofia pondered the future. She had always believed in the power of words to inspire and educate, but could they stand against the tide of oppression that seemed to be approaching? Her thoughts often drifted to her Jewish friends and neighbors, integral threads in the tapestry of Lwów's community. She feared for their safety in the face of growing anti-Semitic sentiments. One evening, while attending a literary gathering, Zofia overheard a conversation that chilled her to the bone. A fellow writer spoke of the Nuremberg laws in Germany and the systematic persecution of Jews. The realization struck her: if such horrors could unfold in Germany, they could very well spread to Poland. The weight of this knowledge pressed heavily upon her. Determined not to remain passive, Zofia began to weave subtle messages of resistance into her writings. She emphasized themes of unity, courage, and the importance of standing against injustice. Her pen became a tool of defiance, crafting narratives that urged her readers to remain vigilant and compassionate. As 1938 drew to a close, the shadows over Europe lengthened. Zofia's resolve hardened. She knew that the coming years would test the very core of her beliefs and that she would need to summon every ounce of courage to face the challenges ahead. Within days, Lwów fell under occupation. The once familiar streets were now patrolled by foreign soldiers, their presence a constant reminder of lost sovereignty. Curfews were imposed, and the freedoms that Zofia and her fellow citizens had cherished were stripped away. Zofia's heart ached as she witnessed the immediate impact on the Jewish community. Long-standing businesses were shuttered, synagogues desecrated, and families forced from their homes. The brutality was swift and unrelenting. She recalled a poignant moment when she saw a young Jewish boy, no older than 10, clutching a tattered book as soldiers dragged his father away. The boy's eyes, wide with fear and confusion, haunted her thoughts. In the face of such atrocities, Zofia's initial response was to amplify her literary efforts. She penned essays and articles that subtly criticized the occupiers and highlighted the resilience of the Polish spirit. Her writings became a beacon of hope for many, a reminder that the essence of Poland could not be extinguished by force. However, as the occupation tightened its grip, Zofia realized that words, though powerful, had their limitations. The systematic persecution of Jews intensified, with ghettos established and deportations becoming alarmingly frequent. The scale of the suffering demanded more than literary resistance. It required direct action. Driven by a profound sense of duty, Zofia began to connect with underground resistance groups. She attended clandestine meetings, often held in the basements of trusted allies, where plans were devised to aid those in peril. The risks were immense, the Gestapo's reach was extensive, and betrayal lurked in every shadow. Yet Zofia's resolve was unwavering. One evening, during a covert gathering, a fellow resistor shared harrowing accounts from the Warsaw Ghetto. The stories of starvation, disease, and relentless brutality left the group in stunned silence. It was then that Zofia spoke, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "We cannot stand idly by while our fellow humans are subjected to such inhumanity. our conscience demands action. This pivotal moment marked the beginning of Zofia's transition from writer to active resistor. She understood that the fight against tyranny required both the pen and the sword. Her journey into the depths of resistance had begun, and there would be no turning back. By 1942, the situation had deteriorated beyond imagination. The final solution was in full effect, and the mass extermination of Jews was a horrifying reality. Zofia, now deeply embedded in the resistance, recognized the urgent need for a dedicated effort to save as many lives as possible. In collaboration with fellow activists, she co-founded the Council to Aid Jews, known by its code name, Żegota. This clandestine organization was unique in its mission, focusing solely on providing assistance to Jews facing persecution. Żegota's operations were vast and varied, encompassing the provision of false identity documents, financial support, medical care, and the establishment of safe houses. The room was dimly lit, shadows pooling in the corners as Zofia looked around at the faces of her fellow resistors. The whispers of the final solution had reached them, casting a grim certainty over their work. Each person in that room understood the peril they faced. Żegota wasn't merely a humanitarian effort, it was a lifeline, a last hope for those marked for destruction. Zofia's heart pounded as she recalled a recent raid on the Warsaw Ghetto. Children had been separated from their parents, young and old alike, forced onto trains. She couldn't forget their faces, their eyes wide with terror, staring back as they were torn from everything they knew. Żegota was born from necessity, and Zofia was at its core. This wasn't just an organization, it was a promise to protect the innocent, no matter the cost. Żegota's first mission was small, delivering food and medicine to a family hiding in a cellar on the outskirts of Warsaw. Zofia had never felt more alive or more terrified as she moved through the streets that night, her heart racing at every checkpoint. "Keep your head down, Zofia," she reminded herself, clutching the basket of supplies tightly. The journey was treacherous, with soldiers stationed on nearly every corner, their harsh voices echoing through the empty streets. When she finally reached the hiding place, she was greeted by a woman whose face was lined with fear and exhaustion. The woman's children huddled close to her, their eyes sunken, their cheeks hollow from days without enough food. Zofia knelt, passing them bread and a small vial of medicine. "Hold on a little longer," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're not alone." In that moment, she understood that Żegota wasn't just saving lives, it was restoring hope. Żegota quickly expanded, and soon its efforts reached even deeper into the ghettos. Zofia became involved in one of the most perilous aspects of their work, rescuing Jewish children. These missions were delicate, requiring meticulous planning and absolute secrecy. The Gestapo was relentless, and the punishment for aiding Jews was execution. Yet Zofia and her fellow resistors continued undeterred. Each child rescued felt like a small victory, a moment of light in a world shrouded in darkness. One cold night, Zofia received word of a young boy named Michał who needed to be smuggled out of the ghetto. His parents had been taken, leaving him alone and vulnerable. She knew the risks, but there was no hesitation. Disguised as a nun, Zofia made her way to the edge of the ghetto, where an ally was waiting with the boy. Michał's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear as he clung to a small, tattered toy. Zofia knelt down, gently placing her hands on his shoulders. "Michał," she whispered, "I'm here to take you somewhere safe." As they navigated the darkened streets, Zofia's heart pounded with each step. She tightened her grip on Michał's hand, whispering words of comfort as they approached a checkpoint. The guard's gaze lingered on them for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Michał. Zofia held her breath, forcing herself to meet the guard's gaze with calm conviction. "God bless you, sister," the guard muttered, waving them through. Relief washed over her as they passed, but she didn't let go of Michał's hand until they reached the safe house. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. That night, as she watched Michał fall asleep in the safety of the hidden room, Zofia's resolve grew even stronger. Żegota was no longer just an act of defiance, it was her life's purpose. She knew that every moment, every heartbeat, could mean the difference between life and the end for those they were trying to save. In early 1943, Żegota's work had expanded dramatically. The organization had saved hundreds, each rescue a testament to their bravery and resourcefulness. Zofia became one of Żegota's most dedicated leaders, coordinating missions, arranging safe houses, and ensuring supplies reached those in hiding. But with each success came greater scrutiny, and it wasn't long before the Gestapo began to take notice. One evening, as Zofia was finalizing plans for a new mission, she heard a sharp knock at the door. Her heart stopped. She knew what this could mean. Her escape had been planned for such an occasion. There was a trapdoor hidden behind her bookcase, leading to an underground tunnel that connected to a nearby safe house. Grabbing her coat and a small bag, she slipped into the tunnel just as she heard the door splinter behind her. The cold, damp air of the tunnel wrapped around her as she moved quickly, each step echoing in the confined space. She could hear the Gestapo agents searching her apartment above, their voices sharp and angry. She held her breath, willing herself to remain calm. "Keep moving, Zofia," she thought, clenching her fist to steady herself. When she finally emerged in the safe house, she collapsed, her body trembling as the adrenaline subsided. She knew she couldn't return to her apartment, but that night, Zofia made a silent vow. She would not stop no matter the cost. By 1944, Zofia's work with Żegota had saved countless lives, but the Gestapo's pursuit of her was relentless. In July, they finally captured her. She was dragged to the notorious Pawiak prison in Warsaw, where countless resistors had been held and tortured. The cell was cold and barren, its stone walls echoing with the cries of others who had been brought there. Interrogations followed, each one more brutal than the last. They wanted names, locations, information that could dismantle Żegota. But Zofia remained silent, her resolve unbroken. During one particularly grueling session, an officer leaned close, sneering at her. "You think you're strong?" he hissed. "You're nothing. Just a foolish woman playing a dangerous game." Zofia looked him in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "I'm fighting for something far greater than myself," she replied, her voice steady. "You will never understand that." Despite the endless days of darkness and isolation, Zofia held on to her hope. She would recall the faces of the children she had helped, the families who had been given a second chance. Their memories gave her strength, a reminder that her suffering was not in vain. After months of imprisonment, the resistance managed to secure her release, and though weakened, Zofia returned to Żegota, ready to continue the fight. The weight of war had settled heavily over Poland by 1943, blanketing Zofia Kossak-Szczucka's life with constant danger and uncertainty. Each day, her work with Żegota became more intense, each mission riskier than the last. Żegota had grown beyond its initial reach, becoming a network that spanned cities and countrysides, hiding countless Jewish families, smuggling children out of ghettos, and providing the essentials that made survival possible. Zofia was one of the key figures in this vast network, her role a combination of leader, organizer, and on-the-ground operative. But the Gestapo was closing in. The underground networks that Zofia depended on were plagued by betrayal, as German collaborators infiltrated circles that once seemed secure. Zofia knew that every day was a borrowed one. Yet, despite the fear, she pressed on, driven by the lives she saw hanging in the balance. One cold March morning, she received a tip that a Jewish family hiding in a small Warsaw apartment was running out of food. The children were weak, and the parents were terrified to leave for fear of being spotted and reported. Zofia took the mission herself. Disguised in plain clothing, she navigated Warsaw's ever-present checkpoints, gripping a small bag of food and medical supplies beneath her coat. Her heart beat faster with each guard she passed, each suspicious glance that lingered on her too long. Every step was a risk, every moment a gamble that she wouldn't be noticed. When she reached the apartment, the mother opened the door with a trembling hand, her eyes widening with relief when she saw Zofia. Inside, 2 young children sat huddled under blankets, their faces thin and pale. Zofia knelt beside them, her heart breaking at the sight. She offered them bread and whispered, "We haven't forgotten you. You're not alone." But as she prepared to leave, she sensed something was wrong. A man in the hallway cast a furtive glance at her, then hurried down the stairs. Her instincts told her he had seen something, or worse, recognized her. She knew she had to move quickly. Stepping outside, she kept her head low, her pace steady, but purposeful. Her goal was to melt into the crowd, to become just another passerby on a busy street. Yet despite her best efforts, her fear was realized. Within days, Zofia's name appeared on a Gestapo list of suspects. Her life had always carried a risk, but now the danger was tangible, immediate, and all-consuming. On a damp evening in early April, Zofia's world turned upside down. She had barely returned from another mission when she heard heavy footsteps outside her apartment. A knock pounded against her door, a sound so loud it seemed to echo within her bones. She had no time to hide, no time to escape through the small tunnel she had prepared beneath her kitchen floor. The door burst open, and 3 Gestapo officers stormed into her apartment. "Zofia Kossak-Szczucka!" one of them barked. She looked up, defiant even as fear surged through her. "You are under arrest for aiding enemies of the Reich." They bound her hands, rough rope biting into her wrists, and led her through the streets of Warsaw. Neighbors looked on, some glancing away in fear, others watching with sorrow. Zofia held her head high, refusing to show weakness. "They can take me," she thought, "but they cannot take my spirit." She was taken to Pawiak prison, notorious for its treatment of resistance fighters. The cold gray walls of the prison loomed like a fortress of despair, and the stench of fear hung heavy in the air. Zofia was led down narrow corridors, each step echoing, until they shoved her into a small dark cell. The interrogations began the next day. She was dragged from her cell and placed in a chair under a bright, unforgiving light. The Gestapo officer who faced her was calm, almost detached, his eyes cold as he read from a list of accusations. "You are accused of conspiring against the Reich, of aiding Jews, and of participating in the underground movement known as Żegota," he stated, each word cutting like a knife. Zofia held her silence, knowing that any admission would not only condemn her, but could expose others. "Tell us about Żegota," the officer continued, his voice tightening with impatience. When she remained silent, he slammed his fist onto the table. "We know you're involved. We know what you are." Zofia looked him directly in the eye, her expression unyielding. "You may know what I am," she said quietly, "but you will never understand why I do what I do." Over the next few weeks, the interrogations intensified. The officers used every method to break her: endless questioning, sleep deprivation, even physical abuse. But Zofia remained resolute. When the pain became unbearable, she would think of the children she had helped save, the families who depended on Żegota's work. Her suffering was a small price to pay if it meant keeping them safe. During one session, the officer leaned in close, his voice a low hiss. "Tell us who else is in Żegota, and this will all end." Zofia's voice was barely a whisper, but her words carried strength. "I would rather die than betray them." Her refusal to cooperate made her a target of increased brutality. Each day in that cell, she was pushed to her physical and emotional limits. Hunger gnawed at her, and exhaustion weighed heavily on her mind, but she held on to her memories of those she had helped. The thought of them gave her strength. Despite the isolation, Zofia was not completely alone. Through small whispered conversations in the prison yard, she connected with other resistance fighters. They would exchange small words of encouragement, stolen glances, and subtle gestures. Zofia became a source of strength for them, her quiet defiance inspiring others to hold on. One evening, she slipped a note to a young woman who had been captured delivering supplies to Jewish families. It simply read, "Hold on. They cannot break what they do not understand." The woman clutched the note, her face softening as she read Zofia's words. Small acts of rebellion like this gave Zofia a sense of purpose, even in captivity. After months in Pawiak, Żegota managed to negotiate her release through underground channels and bribes. On a cold autumn morning, Zofia was led out of the prison gates, her body weakened, but her spirit unbroken. She took her first steps of freedom with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that her fight was far from over. When she returned to Żegota, her comrades welcomed her with open arms, their faces reflecting a mixture of relief and admiration. Though physically weakened, Zofia was more determined than ever. She had survived the Gestapo, the torture, the endless nights of despair, and emerged with her resolve intact. In early 1944, Zofia returned to Żegota's headquarters, with scars from her imprisonment, both visible and hidden. Every breath felt like a gift, and every step she took was fueled by a fierce determination to make her suffering count. Zofia's experiences in Pawiak prison had only sharpened her resolve, turning her into a force that refused to back down. She knew that time was running out. The Third Reich's grip was tightening, and with each passing month, the survival of Poland's Jewish population became more precarious. Żegota had grown in size and reach, with members scattered across Poland. But this growth came at a cost. With more people came more risks, and every rescue, every delivery was fraught with danger. The organization's core mission was clear: save as many lives as possible before it was too late. Zofia threw herself into the work, overseeing plans, coordinating rescue operations, and finding new hiding places for families on the run. Żegota had become her life's purpose, a beacon of hope amid a seemingly endless night. One cold evening, Zofia and her team gathered in a candlelit basement to discuss a mission that everyone deemed impossible. A group of Jewish children was trapped in a nearby ghetto, their caretakers desperate for help. The Germans had begun rounding up families for deportation, and the fate of these children was all but sealed. Their only chance was escape, but smuggling children out of a heavily guarded ghetto was no small task. The soldiers watched every exit, patrolled every street, and the penalty for aiding Jews was execution. Zofia looked around at the faces of her comrades, her own face set with resolve. "We will not abandon them," she declared. "If they catch us, so be it. But these children will know freedom if it's the last thing we do." The plan was harrowing. Zofia and 2 other Żegota members would disguise themselves as sanitation workers, entering the ghetto under the pretense of collecting waste. Once inside, they would gather the children, hiding them beneath loose boards in the cart. It was a plan with slim chances of success, but Zofia believed in the strength of Żegota's mission. Her voice steady, she gave instructions, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. The day of the mission dawned, gray and overcast. Zofia dressed in a worn coat, her face smeared with ash to blend in with the grimy workers. As she pushed the cart toward the ghetto, every muscle in her body was taut with anticipation. The children's lives depended on every move, every decision she made. She approached the ghetto entrance where 2 soldiers blocked her path, their expressions cold and unyielding. One of them eyed her suspiciously. "What's your business here?" he asked, his tone laced with doubt. Zofia forced herself to look down, adopting the demeanor of a worn-out laborer. "Sanitation work," she mumbled, gripping the handle of the cart as if it were her lifeline. The soldier stared at her for a moment, then waved her through, clearly uninterested in a seemingly unremarkable woman. Inside the ghetto, the air was thick with despair. Zofia kept her head down as she navigated the narrow alleys, her heart breaking at the sight of hollow-eyed children and elderly people huddled together, their faces etched with fear. She found the building where the children were hidden, and with a quick knock, a door creaked open to reveal a woman clutching 2 small children. "They're ready," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. Zofia knelt, meeting the children's frightened gazes. "We're going somewhere safe," she whispered. "Stay as quiet as you can. You're going to be free." She guided them into the cart, carefully placing boards over them. Each child was silent, too terrified to make a sound. Zofia pushed the cart back toward the ghetto exit, her heart pounding with every step. As they neared the checkpoint, she prayed silently, her knuckles white as she held onto the cart's handle. The soldiers eyed her once more, but after a tense pause, they allowed her to pass. Only when they were miles from the ghetto did Zofia allow herself to breathe. She guided the children to a safe house, tears stinging her eyes as she watched them eat for the first time in days. "You're safe now," she whispered, knowing the weight of those words and how fragile safety truly was. As Żegota's activities intensified, so did the Gestapo's efforts to dismantle the resistance. Zofia knew they were running out of time. Safe houses were raided with increasing frequency, and trusted contacts disappeared without a trace. Each day brought news of more Jewish families deported, more lives lost. Zofia felt the weight of these losses deeply, each name a reminder of the stakes they faced. In the summer of 1944, Zofia received a warning from a fellow resistor. The Gestapo had learned of Żegota's headquarters, and was closing in. There was no time to lose. Jagoda's core members were scattered, some fleeing to the countryside, others moving deeper underground. Zofia knew she would have to leave the city she loved, but not before securing the safety of as many people as possible. One final mission weighed heavily on her mind. A prominent Jewish family, hiding on the outskirts of Warsaw, had lost their cover. They were at high risk, and Jagoda was their last hope. Zofia took it upon herself to secure their escape, enlisting the help of a priest who had connections to rural safe houses. Under the cover of darkness, Zofia met the family, a father, mother, and 2 teenage daughters, and guided them through the woods, navigating by moonlight. She whispered words of comfort as they trudged forward, their faces pale with fear. Hours passed, each step bringing them closer to safety. As dawn broke, they reached the edge of a small village where allies waited to take them further. Zofia watched as they were led away, relief washing over her. She had given them a chance, a sliver of hope in a world that had offered them none. After months of relentless work, Zofia's health began to fail. The constant stress, fear, and physical toll had left her weak, yet her spirit remained unbroken. Jagoda had become her life's purpose, and though she knew the war's end was nearing, the fight was far from over. Each life saved was a testament to their defiance, to the belief that even in the darkest of times, compassion could prevail. Zofia received word that she was to be moved out of Warsaw as the Allied forces approached. She left the city with a heavy heart, her mind filled with memories of the lives she had touched, the children she had saved, and the friends she had lost. She knew that, while she might be forced to leave the front lines, her work and her legacy would endure. Jagoda continued its operations, driven by the spirit Zofia had instilled in them. As the war drew to a close, Zofia watched with a mixture of grief and pride as Poland began to reclaim its freedom. She knew that her country had been scarred, that the losses were unimaginable. Yet she also knew that the courage and sacrifice of those who had resisted would never be forgotten. As the Allies liberated Europe, Zofia reflected on the journey she had undertaken, from writer to resistor, from observer to savior. Jagoda's legacy would live on, a reminder that in the face of evil, there would always be those who chose to stand, to protect, and to believe in the dignity of every human life.